they made a Charlie Brown Christmas, an Apple TV Plus I'm so mad I can't even say it. Yellowha, what is up my homesicles? Happy holidays, assuming I release this at the correct time. I am Atticus Cornett, insane programmer and rant extraordinaire, and welcome to Atticus Rants About Stuff, the #1 podcast hosted by someone who owns an Android and is actually smug about it. Without further ado, let's get down to today's business. I hate Apple's business. There was a time long ago that I would have told you that Apple was an awesome, innovative company that made good products at fair prices. But if you couldn't already tell, my opinion on them has shifted significantly in the past few years. In my opinion, Apple has now built up a history of using their position of almost monopoly on the American phone market to exploit both consumers and developers for more profit. On top of this, they use aggressive tactics to grow their businesses in ways that hurt everyone else. So let's start off with the App Store. So Apple's App Store is the only App Store that is available on the iPhone. This gives the App Store a complete monopoly over what apps can be on the system. Now, on Android, most phones have you locked into the Google Play Store by default, but you can actually get around this on Android using a technique called sideloading. So, sideloading is where you can download an app that is not on any store and you can install it without using the store. And sideloading is not possible on the iPhone. You cannot download any apps that are not in the iPhone App Store, with certain development exceptions that I will discuss later. It should be noted that there are technically ways to get an app to sideload on iOS, but it's much more difficult than it is on Android, and it's not officially supported. Sometimes it can even involve jailbreaking your phone, which can void the warranty. So why is it such a big deal that you're locked into the App Store? Well, this forces all developers of iPhone apps to bend to Apple's will, including a 30% cut of all payments after a certain price threshold on the App Store. Now, admittedly, small developers only pay a 15% cut of payments, but that's still a very significant amount. Apple also does not allow apps to use any other payment methods, with very few exceptions. They are kind of opening up other payment options for very certain apps, but the rules to me aren't completely clear, and again, this is only in very limited cases. So, Apple doesn't even allow you to use a third-party payment method like Stripe to accept payments. You have to take it through Apple's system, because Apple then can take a 30% cut. And if an app doesn't, or a developer doesn't bend to Apple's will, they can be permanently kicked off of the platform. For example, this is what happened to Epic Games with Fortnite. Now, I'm not saying that Epic Games has a completely clean sheet as a company, but it seems a little unfair that Apple has the power to completely lock them out of one of the world's largest platforms just because they gave users the option of using their website to pay instead of using an app. Now, to be clear, with Fortnite, they weren't even just completely circumventing Apple's system. They just notified users on the iPhone that they could go to the Fortnite website and get a better deal. So, because they actually just told the users about that option, they got completely kicked off of the App Store. To me, that's just too much power for Apple, and I think people should be able to release their own apps and run apps that aren't in Apple's ecosystem. Now, the second major issue I have with Apple's whole setup is their development experience. Now, I understand that this is not something that's going to apply to most people, because most people aren't developing apps for the iPhone. But I am trying to develop apps for Android, Windows, and all sorts of platforms. But people have asked me, hey, are you going to put this out on iPhone? And I've always had to say no for some of these reasons I'm about to discuss. So, Developing for Apple's platforms is very hard to do without using an Apple system to create the app. So you can't develop software for Mac OS or iPhone without using a Mac, with very few exceptions. So this may sound logical at first. You have to have the hardware that you're using to test on and to build on and write code on. So it might sound like it makes sense at first until you realize that I develop on Windows, and Windows machines can build apps for Linux and Android. Linux machines can also build apps for Android and Windows. So when it comes to cross-building with Windows and Linux and Android devices, it all works fine. So the only outlier there is Macs and iPhones. All of Apple's systems are very locked in. Now, technically, you don't have to have a Mac to build for Mac OS, because if you're writing a cross-platform app with technology like Electron.js, like I have, you can spin up a virtual Mac in the cloud for free on GitHub if it's a public project. But that's still technically using a Mac. I'm just doing a workaround way to have a virtual Mac in the cloud. So ultimately, there is no real way to code for a macOS app or an iPhone app without having the actual device, mainly a Mac to develop on. So, and this only applies for macOS, to be clear, this virtual cloud computer. I have found no way that I can actually build for an iPhone without buying a Mac. What all of this means is that as a Windows user, I am completely locked out of developing apps for an iPhone without buying a $1,000 machine from Apple. And it's not just that I can't emulate an iPhone on Windows. For example, with Android, you can actually spin up a virtual Android device to test on while developing on Windows. You can't do that with iPhone. But it's not just that you can't emulate it, you can't even download the software that's required to build for iOS. You can't even get your foot in the door and write the code, and then get someone else to run it for you. You have to be writing the code on a Mac, because the software that's used to build for iOS is only available on Mac, and it's infuriating. And I know this isn't an issue that really seems to affect anyone other than developers, but it does mean that there's a lot of cool apps out there and a lot of cool developers that are going to look at maybe putting out an app on iOS, and they just don't, solely because it would be too much investment to build for iOS. So, you've already heard plenty about how Apple hurts developers, but let's hear about how Apple hurts your average, everyday consumer. The big way is that they do not support the right to repair, and are pretty aggressive about fighting the right to repair. But before I just say that's bad, let's take a step back. What is right to repair? So, right to repair is the idea that consumers have a right to repair their own damaged devices without having to go directly back to the manufacturer. This could mean doing a DIY repair at home with an iFixit kit or whatever tools or parts you have lying around, or it could even mean taking it to a local repair shop that is in no way affiliated with the manufacturer, in this case, Apple. It matters. Right to repair really matters, and this is why. Right to repair matters because without the right to repair, Apple can charge whatever they want for repairs and can provide whatever quality of service they want without customers having any other option. So like with the App Store, it gives them a complete monopoly over the function of their own devices even after they're purchased. And this isn't just theoretical. Apple actually has a history of overquoting prices for repairs through their Genius Bar repair services. One major example was covered by CBC News in a video titled "Apple Under Fire for Allegations of Controversial Business Practices," and it resulted in the Apple Genius Bar saying that a whole MacBook needed to be replaced, which would have cost around $1,000. They then took the same MacBook to an independent repair shop, and the fix took the repairman under 2 minutes. Under 2 minutes. And the shop owner said that they would typically do that repair for free. So specifically what happened is the backlight cable, the screen cable on the MacBook had been damaged and the backlight part had come out. The Apple employee said, "Oh, the screen's dead. Internal parts are probably damaged because water indicators were set off, and this is going to cost about as much as a new MacBook to replace." Then, when I believe it was Louis Rossmann looked at the same device, he discovered that all that was happening was the backlight was out. He bent the backlight part of the monitor connector back into place inside of the MacBook, and it instantly worked fine. Additionally, these water indicators that made the Apple employees think that they had water damage inside of their computer are actually notorious for being easy to set off. In fact, just being in a humid room can set off a water indicator. So they're not really great indicators of what's actually happened, and the Genius Bar should have known that and done a further investigation. So the only real argument against right to repair is that Apple employees have the official training straight from Apple, and they can use Apple genuine repair parts. Now, we've just demonstrated official training can mean absolutely nothing, and the only reason that Apple is the only company that repairs with genuine parts is because they will not sell extra parts to independent repair shops. Now, it should be noted that that whole not selling parts is a historical claim and isn't completely true anymore. Apple has recently started selling parts to independent repair shops, but it is my understanding that the pricing of these parts is so high that it brings the price to almost what you would pay at the Genius Bar, and on top of that, it can be hard to get into this repair part system. Not only does right to repair just plain hurt the consumer, but it also demonstrates a corporate philosophy that I disagree with. Not supporting right to repair shows that despite the fact that you bought and own the device, Apple does not believe that you should be able to do whatever you want with your device. They still want you to be locked into their repair system, their app system. They want you in their system to spend more money, because they think that even though you've purchased the device, you should still stay as a continual transaction, and you should keep giving them more money. Now, in my opinion, once you purchase a device, you've paid Apple the money, you should be able to use it and repair it however you want. The transaction should be over. You should not be a commodity to them where they keep charging you in all sorts of different ways. I think that once you purchase a device, you should have the right to use it and repair it however you want without any interference from the company that you've purchased it from, because the transaction at that point should be over. Now, the next major issue that I personally have with Apple is I think that they mislead customers in two major ways: the illusion of innovation and the illusion of privacy. So, what do I mean by the illusion of innovation? So, in my opinion, Apple tries to make it look like everything they do is just on the cutting edge of technology, and they're breaking new ground, they're doing all sorts of stuff that's never been done before. But this is very often untrue. For example, with Apple's latest phone, they are heavily advertising a new crash detection feature like it's a big game changer on the smartphone scene. Now, not that I don't support them adding a car crash detection feature in SOS. I think that's great. I think that's going to hopefully save lives. So I think that's a very important feature. But they're making it seem like it's this whole new thing that only they are doing. But Androids have had that as far back as 2019 on certain models. So they're saying in 2022 that they're breaking ground with stuff that's been out for 3 years, but they're making it look like they're doing it bigger and better than anyone else and that this is new ground. That's not even completely true. Just a side note is that Apple's new car crash detection feature has been set off by roller coasters and a few other things already that just are completely not car crashes. So Apple's been working on patching quite a few issues with their car crash detection feature automatically activating. Now, I'm not saying that, the G-forces of a roller coaster aren't necessarily similar to that of a car crash, but I am saying that I haven't heard about Androids doing that lately. Another big one is wireless charging. So some Androids have had this option as far back as 2012, and it became a standard on Samsung phones, which Samsung is the biggest Android manufacturer. It might be Huawei now, but Samsung's kind of the industry leader. It became a standard on Samsung phones in 2015. It was on Android as far back as 2012. iPhone, on the other hand, didn't get this feature until the iPhone 8 in 2017, and again, they keep acting like this is big new ground, but remember, they got it in 2017, Androids got it in 2012, and my toothbrush has had it for quite a few years, so they're not breaking any new ground that Philips Sonicare didn't break quite a few years ago. I could go on, but we would be here all day. So here's just a quick list of a few other things that either Android had first, or that the iPhone doesn't even have yet. Those include custom app icons, banner notifications for phone calls, split-screen apps, always-on displays, RCS support, expandable storage, secure face recognition, fingerprint scanners, and 5G support. All of these came to Android first, and some of these are not even on the iPhone yet. Now, the other thing I mentioned is the illusion of caring about user privacy. So Apple tries to look like they really care about their users' privacy. What's really funny, though, is that the way they've dealt with privacy so far has actually boosted the value of their own ad business that tracks you. So, last year, Apple released their new privacy controls in an iOS update. Everybody was making a big deal about it. I think Facebook stock just slumped a ton. It was a big deal. The update allowed users to block third-party trackers in pretty much all apps. So this sounds like a really big win for the consumer, which it is partially. It's a win in some cases, but it also just so happens to block only, here's the key word, third-party tracking. So you're going to be able to block Facebook from tracking you, which is great. If you don't want them tracking you, block it out. I support that. You can block Google apps from tracking you. That's great. You can block all sorts of tracking from everyone except Apple. So, yes, you are getting more privacy, which is great, but this also happens to add a lot of value to Apple's own ad system, because now their ad system is the only one that has accurate tracking information and accurate, interests and all sorts of stuff for iPhone users. So they've kind of just boosted their own ad system while hurting other companies. Now, by making Apple the only company that can use tracking ads on iPhone, they become the best ad option for companies that are looking to use targeted ads on iPhone. While this privacy move has been somewhat beneficial to the consumer, it seems to me that this was more a move designed to cut out ad competition and not really to help consumers. Now we're just going to get into the variety section, where I just have a few other random tidbits that I'm mad at Apple about that I couldn't really fit into any other section of the video. So here's the random quickfire section. So iPhone removing the headphone jack from their phone started a trend that I really hate. It's kind of funny though, because they removed the headphone jack at the same time as releasing their AirPods, which to me seems like a way to push more consumers into buying their more expensive earbuds. Now, a lot of Androids have also removed the headphone jack, but iPhone was the first-ish. I mean, there are a couple phones here and there that didn't have it before them, but iPhone started the big trend of removing the headphone jack, and I just like my headphone jack, man. Let me use my wired earbuds. Apple phones are still using the outdated Lightning port. When the Lightning port was introduced, it was a great innovation. Don't get me wrong, the Lightning port was a very necessary thing to create, and I think it was great that Apple made it originally. But now, it kind of only seems to stick around to make Apple money from manufacturing it, because USB-C is better in pretty much every way. Not only because the USB-C spec is better than the Lightning port spec, it's faster, I believe it can carry more voltage. There's a lot of things that make USB-C superior, and very few that make it worse. But also, because if Apple switched to USB-C, that would mean that Android and iPhone users could share a single charger. You no longer have the issue of, oh, you walk into a party, oh, my phone's almost dead. Oh, can I charge my phone? No, we only have iPhone chargers. Or, no, we only have Android chargers. It would allow us to use the same charger, and that would be really convenient when you're at other people's homes, for if you're out and about. It would just be great if we could all just share one charger, please. I'm tired of lugging around all sorts of different types of chargers. Please, Apple, just switch to USB-C. And we also have that Apple refuses to support RCS, which is Rich Communication Services. So this is an open standard that would allow for most iOS message or iMessage features to work across both Android and iOS, including higher quality images and videos, reactions, read receipts. All of these could work across iMessage and Androids. I mean, it would be great if we could all just have those as standard features. And yeah, admittedly, iMessage has had better features than just plain texting, which is what Android has in a lot of ways, but RCS has really brought messaging on Android up to that level. So Androids already support RCS among each other, so you can see when each other is typing, all sorts of stuff. And if Apple would also support RCS, that would mean that everyone could have pretty much a full iMessage experience in chats. It would make texting just a whole lot better if Apple would just please support it. The standard's already there, it wouldn't be hard. They just need to update the software, but they have been refusing to do that because they want to make iMessage feel more superior, and they want to kind of perpetuate that iPhone is the premium brand feel. And now, we end with my last point. The most evil thing that Apple has done, the whole reason I chose to release this in December, they made a Charlie Brown Christmas, an Apple TV Plus I'm so mad I can't even say it. They made Apple... It makes me mad. They made a Charlie Brown Christmas an Apple TV Plus exclusive. There we go. I said it. That's just evil. That's just wrong. You took a Charlie Brown Christmas away from everyone, Apple. And yes, they are technically allowing some free viewership on certain days, but that they still largely took away a Charlie Brown Christmas from the masses. And, you know, letting you view it for free on certain days when used to you could just view it for free on a lot of services like ABC before, it's kind of like robbing a bank, like stealing $1 million, then coming back the next day and saying, oh, but here's 10,000 back, I'm so generous. No, you're not. Get over yourself. You made a Charlie Brown Christmas an Apple TV Plus exclusive to try to get more people to sign up for your stupid TV service that admittedly has good stuff on there, but mostly because you just kind of buy up everything that's good. So, I think that's the worst thing that Apple's done, but they've done a lot of other bad stuff. It's just evil to take away Charlie Brown Christmas. Hold up, editing Atticus here. I bet you thought this episode was almost over, but there's been some developments that I feel like I should throw in here before ending the episode, and also some other things that I realized I didn't make especially clear while editing, so I'm going to discuss those briefly too. So first off, as for Apple not using USB-C and Apple not allowing sideloading, it is possible that that will not be true for much longer, because it looks like the European Union is looking into forcing Apple to use USB-C for its devices and also to allow sideloading in the European European Union, which is probably going to end up being a change that applies everywhere, hopefully. Except that I've read into side loading on Apple devices, and it looks like if Apple does enable side loading to comply with European Union laws, how they're looking at doing it now would still have them verifying the security of third-party apps, which sounds like it could be good, except for the fact that they may charge a fee to be vetted for security purposes to be allowed to sideload. And if you're being verified and paying a fee to Apple to be able to be an app that can be sideloaded, that kind of defeats the purpose, because the whole purpose of sideloading is to be able to install things that Apple doesn't want to allow on their App Store and doesn't necessarily comply with their rules. Now, you may think that for security purposes this is helpful, but if they're charging a fee, what it really means is that ultimately Apple is just trying to find a way to technically allow sideloading while still putting money into their ecosystem. The second thing that I feel like I should make a little clear is right to repair is not just an Apple issue. So certain major Android manufacturers do not sell replacement parts for their phones. So right to repair is not specifically an iPhone and an Apple issue. It is a broader technology issue right now. So I thought I should make that clear, that that's not just Apple in the phone space, and that not all Androids are necessarily better, but that doesn't mean I don't still have problem with Apple doing it. And even though Apple isn't really an outlier in not supporting right to repair for phones, they are an outlier when it comes to the laptop and desktop space, because right to repair has been a lot better in the laptop space and the desktop space, where I could easily pick up, parts to replace parts of my desktop, to replace parts of my laptop. That's something that I wasn't actually able to do. So although they aren't really out of the normal when it comes to not supporting right to repair for phones, they are definitely a bit more out there when it comes to laptops and desktops. But this isn't just an Apple issue, it's kind of an industry-wide issue right now. Finally, one last thing that I should make clear is about the Apple's independent repair program. I noted that it could be hard to get into and possibly expensive. I should say that I haven't been able to find where I got the higher price from. That's something that I believe I read up on a while ago, but I haven't super double checked that, so take that with a grain of salt. But what I have confirmed, actually, is something that I didn't note at all, is that by joining Apple's independent repair program, I didn't know this before doing some further research, you are actually allowing Apple to randomly check in on your shop to see if you have anything that Apple doesn't approve of. So you're actually, by joining the independent repair shop program, you're actually allowing Apple to just come into your shop and see if you have anything that Apple isn't really a fan of, which includes device schematics, which aren't a part of Apple's independent repair program, which device schematics are pretty important for certain repairs. So it actually means that by joining Apple's independent repair shop program, you're actually limiting your ability to repair Apple devices, because they don't want you actually having access to some important information about devices that can be important for doing certain repairs. So it seems like all around, Apple's independent repair program is a pretty bad deal and is really just more of a PR stunt. Those are just a few notes that I wanted to throw in here, especially the whole side loading notes, because that's actually something recent that's just come out in the past few days. I'll try to keep the episode description and the YouTube description up to date, so that if there's any new developments, like the ones that happened literally in the middle of editing this episode, I discovered the side loading thing, because that's brand new news, fresh off the press. I'll try to keep those up to date with any of the latest news. I'll also have some extra resources for anyone who wants to learn more about right to repair. So that's Editing Atticus, with hopefully not too much rain in the background and sitting on a very creaky chair. Now back to the outro. So, I hope I haven't seemed, too biased. I know I'm almost definitely biased. I'm not a big Apple fan, but I hope I at least presented some fair facts where you can see why I personally don't really like Apple that much. I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas, and if you have any other thoughts about Apple, leave them in the comments below on YouTube. Somehow you can send me a voice message on Anchor. I'm not entirely sure how that works, and I might not even know how to check voice messages on there, but I did know the buttons there, so if you want to send a voice message, be my guest. You sure can try. Again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, happy whatever other holiday you're celebrating, Happy Boxing Day, and I will see you in 1 month, hopefully, well, I won't see you, but you'll hear me, and I'll be watching, but you won't know from where. Goodbye!